You wake up at 6 in the morning, and before your eyes are fully open, you're already making decisions. Not the ones you think you're making, the real ones. The ones that will determine whether today is another day you survive or another day you actually live. You think you're choosing what to wear, what to eat, what to say. But underneath every choice you make today is a deeper choice you're not even aware you're making. Are you moving toward what you want, or are you running from what you fear? Most people never ask this question. They spend their entire lives in motion, believing they're chasing dreams and building futures, when really they're just running increasingly sophisticated escape routes from the things that terrify them. And here's what nobody tells you. You can't see the difference from inside your own life. Fear and desire look identical when you're the one living them. Both get you out of bed. Both make you work hard. Both create the illusion of purpose and direction. But one builds a life. The other builds a cage that looks like a life. And if you're in the cage, you won't know until you've spent decades constructing bars you call success, safety, and sensible choices. There's an old belief we've all inherited, and it sounds reasonable enough. Motivation is motivation. Whether you're motivated by what you want or what you fear doesn't matter, as long as you're moving forward, achieving goals, building something. This narrative is everywhere. Motivational speakers tell you to use your fear as fuel. Self-help books teach you to transform anxiety into ambition. Success culture celebrates people who work 80-hour weeks driven by the terror of failure, calling it hustle and dedication. But that narrative is a lie that's stealing your life one decision at a time. Because fear and desire aren't just different flavors of the same motivation. They're opposite forces that create opposite lives, and pretending they're the same is how you end up successful, secure, and completely dead inside. Your brain runs on two fundamental systems, and every choice you make is powered by one or the other. Neuroscience calls them the approach system and the avoidance system, but you can call them what they really are: the life you're building toward and the death you're running from. The approach system lights up when you move towards something you want: connection, growth, creation, meaning. It's powered by dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation and reward. When this system is driving, you feel alive, engaged, pulled forward by possibility.
The avoidance system activates when you're moving away from threat, rejection, failure, judgment, loss. It's powered by cortisol and adrenaline, the stress hormones that keep you scanning for danger and calculating escape routes. When this system is driving, you feel tense, vigilant, focused on what could go wrong. Here's what changes everything. Both systems can get you to the same destination on paper. Both can make you wealthy, accomplished, partnered, respected. But the life built by approach feels completely different from the life built by avoidance, even when they look identical from the outside. Daniel spent 15 years building a law career his father would finally respect. He worked brutal hours, made partner at 38, earned recognition and money and all the external markers of success. From the outside, he looked like someone living his dream. But here's what Daniel knew and couldn't admit. He didn't want to be a lawyer. He wanted to be a writer. Every achievement in law wasn't moving him toward what he desired. It was moving him away from what he feared, which was his father's disappointment and his own sense of inadequacy if he chose the impractical path. His entire career was an avoidance project dressed up as ambition. And the crazy thing is, it worked. He avoided his father's disappointment. He avoided feeling like a failure. But he also avoided his own life, spending 15 years outrunning fear instead of chasing desire, until he woke up one morning and realized he'd built a successful prison. This is the avoidance trap. When fear is driving, every achievement is really just another way to not feel the thing you're terrified of feeling. You're not building toward a life you want to. You're building away from feelings you're convinced will destroy you if you let them catch up. And the trap is perfect because avoidance motivation actually works in the short term. It gets you out of bed, keeps you productive, creates results. Your brain's avoidance system is designed to keep you alive, and it's very good at its job. But here's what your brain doesn't understand. The threats it's protecting you from aren't the kind that kill you anymore. You're not running from predators. You're running from embarrassment, rejection, judgment, the possibility of trying and failing, the risk of being seen as less than you pretend to be. So you build an entire life around avoiding these psychological deaths, and the avoidance system treats them as seriously as physical threats. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a tiger chasing you and your father's disapproval, between starvation and social rejection, between actual danger and the vulnerable discomfort of pursuing what you really want. Sarah stayed in a relationship for 7 years past its expiration date, not because she loved him. She'd stopped feeling that years ago. She stayed because leaving meant facing the terror of being alone, starting over, admitting she'd wasted time, dealing with his hurt and anger, explaining the breakup to everyone who saw them as the perfect couple.
Her entire relationship became an avoidance project. She wasn't staying for love. She was staying to avoid a long list of fears. And because avoidance motivation is powerful, she got very good at convincing herself she was staying for the right reasons, that every problem was manageable, that this was mature commitment rather than fear-based paralysis. 7 years of her life organized around not feeling scary things, disguised as loyalty and working on the relationship. And here's the devastation. She knew. Somewhere underneath all the justifications, she knew she was trapped in avoidance. But knowing doesn't free you when fear is driving. It just makes the cage more conscious. This is the second layer of the trap. Avoidance doesn't just determine what you do, it determines how you think. When fear is driving, your entire relationship with reality changes. You don't see opportunities, you see risks. You don't feel excitement, you feel anxiety about what could go wrong. Your brain starts to filter every possibility through the question, how could this hurt me? And once that filter is in place, your whole life becomes a game of chess where the only goal is to never be in check. You're not playing to win, you're playing to not lose. Marcus turned down 3 job opportunities that would have advanced his career because each one required relocating, speaking publicly, or managing a team, all things that triggered his fear of being exposed as inadequate. He told himself he was being selective, waiting for the right opportunity, being strategic. But really, his fear was making all his decisions for him, and it was very good at disguising itself as wisdom. Every time he said no to something that scared him, his brain rewarded him with relief, which felt like he'd made the smart choice. But relief isn't the same as fulfillment. And a life optimized for avoiding discomfort isn't the same as a life aligned with desire. This is the negative goal problem. When you're motivated by avoidance, you're chasing negative goals. Don't fail, don't get rejected, don't look stupid, don't end up alone. And negative goals have a fatal flaw. You can achieve them by doing nothing. You can win by never playing. Your brain celebrates this as efficiency. Why take risks when you can stay safe? Why pursue uncertain desires when you can successfully avoid certain fears? The avoidance system sees this as victory. You didn't lose, therefore you won. But here's what your fear-driven brain doesn't account for. A life spent avoiding losses isn't a life. It's existence as damage control. And while you're busy not failing, not being rejected, not looking foolish, the life you actually wanted is happening in the version of you that you're too afraid to become. So what does it look like when desire is driving instead? It looks like the opposite of everything we've been taught about sustainable success and smart decision-making. It looks reckless, naive, impulsive. Because a life built toward what you want requires tolerating the exact feelings that avoidance promises you'll never have to feel.
When Emily quit her corporate job to start her own business, everyone told her she was being irresponsible. She had no safety net, no guarantee of success, no rational reason to believe it would work. She was walking away from security toward uncertainty, which to every avoidance-driven person around her looked insane. But here's what they couldn't see. Emily had spent 10 years in corporate jobs she hated, driven by the fear of financial instability and disappointing her parents. She'd avoided everything she was supposed to avoid, and it had successfully made her miserable, successful, and completely disconnected from any sense of aliveness. Starting her business wasn't reckless. It was the first time in a decade she let desire drive instead of fear. And yes, it meant facing everything her avoidance system had protected her from: uncertainty, potential failure, financial risk, judgment from others. But it also meant finally building toward something instead of away from something. This is what desire-driven living looks like. You're motivated by what you want to create, experience, become. Your brain's approach system is engaged, which means you're focused on possibility rather than threat. You see opportunities where fear-driven people see risks. You feel excitement where they feel anxiety. And here's the part that sounds impossible to people trapped in avoidance. Tolerating fear becomes worth it when you're moving toward something you actually want. The discomfort doesn't disappear, but its meaning changes. It stops being a warning sign that you're in danger and becomes evidence that you're growing. But there's a problem, and it's the reason most people stay trapped in fear-driven lives even after they understand the difference. Switching from avoidance to approach isn't a simple decision. Your brain has been running the avoidance program for years, maybe decades. It's wired to protect you from discomfort, and desire-driven living requires making discomfort your companion instead of your enemy. Jake understood this intellectually. He knew his entire life was organized around avoiding his father's criticism, and he knew it was keeping him small. But every time he tried to make a desire-driven choice, pursuing creative work instead of the practical career, being vulnerable in relationships instead of performing in vulnerability, his avoidance system would flood him with anxiety.
And anxiety is persuasive. It feels like wisdom, like your brain warning you about real danger. Your fear-driven patterns tell you that the safe path is the smart path, that avoidance is just being realistic, that desire is naive and approach is reckless. And when you're flooded with stress hormones, these lies feel like truth. This is why most people intellectually understand they're living fear-driven lives, but can't seem to change. Knowledge isn't enough when your nervous system is hijacked by an avoidance program that's been running on autopilot for years. You need to retrain your brain to tolerate the discomfort of approach. And here's what that actually requires. You have to be willing to feel everything your avoidance system promised you'd never have to feel. Rejection, failure, judgment, the vulnerability of wanting something and not knowing if you'll get it, the humiliation of trying and falling short, the uncertainty of choosing desire over safety.
Most people hear this and think it sounds like too much. They'd rather stay in the cage they've built, calling it security and smart choices, than face the emotional storm that comes with letting desire drive. And that's a completely understandable choice. Avoidance motivation works, just not in the ways that matter. But here's what happens if you stay in the avoidance trap long enough. You don't just build a life around running from fear. You become someone who's forgotten what desire even feels like. You lose touch with what you actually want because your entire identity becomes organized around what you're avoiding. By the time Daniel was 40, he couldn't answer the question, "What do you want?" without his brain immediately translating it into what would be safe. He'd spent so many years motivated by avoiding his father's disappointment that he'd completely lost contact with his own desires. His approach system had atrophied from disuse. This is the ultimate cost of letting fear drive. You don't just delay the life you want, you forget there was ever a life you wanted. Avoidance becomes your entire relationship with existence, and desire becomes a foreign language you no longer speak. So how do you know which force is running your life? You look at what happens when you imagine making the choice that scares you most. If your brain immediately starts calculating all the ways it could go wrong, all the dangers you'd be exposing yourself to, all the security you'd be giving up, that's avoidance talking. But if somewhere underneath the fear, there's a pull, a sense of aliveness at the possibility, a part of you that lights up even while another part of you panics, that's desire trying to speak through the noise of your fear-driven programming. And here's the truth your avoidance system doesn't want you to know. The life you want is on the other side of the feelings you're avoiding. Every time you choose fear over desire, you're choosing a smaller version of yourself. Every time you let avoidance drive, you're trading aliveness for safety that isn't actually keeping you safe from anything that matters. Because fear-driven living protects you from psychological discomfort, but it can't protect you from the slow death of never living your actual life. You'll avoid failure, rejection, judgment, and uncertainty, and in exchange, you'll build a successful, respectable, completely unlived life that you look back on one day and realize was never actually yours. So the question isn't whether you'll feel fear. You will. The question is, are you going to let fear drive, making every decision about what to avoid, building a life organized around not feeling scared? Or are you going to feel the fear and let desire drive anyway, moving toward what you want even when your avoidance system is screaming that it's dangerous. Because here's what changes everything. You think you're choosing between success through fear and risk through desire, but really, you're choosing between someone else's definition of success that keeps you safe and small versus your own definition of aliveness that requires you to grow. You're choosing between a life that looks good from the outside while killing you from the inside versus a life that feels real even when it's hard. And that choice, whether you're conscious of it or not, is the choice you're making right now with every decision, every day. So ask yourself, when you look at the life you're building, who's driving? Your fear of what you lose or your desire for what you could become? Because whichever force you feed is the force that determines whether you survive your life or actually live it.